Hi friends, it's Angie. Still not 100%. And my current theory is 5G, and chronic respiratory issues from birth and stupid smoking, but we won't dwell on that. I'm experimenting with BitChute because I have reached boiling point again. And some of my best work is done when I'm at boiling point. So I'm just going to address a few issues quickly. Tempted to call this, I'll do an intro to this on YouTube and then put the link to BitChute, and anybody that cares to properly look at things will come over here, and if they don't, they're just truth tourists. But I want to shoot from the hip with a few people without using cartoon characters. So I've gone on a couple of panels. I've been on twice with Matt Taylor, who's temporarily retired due to trolling. And I've gone on once with Brian Hurle, who I interviewed last year extensively and had bouncing between 6,000 and 12,000 views. Brian says they went up to 15,000. He thought it was credit to him, but I think it was definitely linked to government monitoring, because I've never seen one of my videos bounce. It would go to 12,000, then back up to 6, then down, then up to 10, then down, back to 8, and then up to 12 again. So I've never seen such intense YouTube interference with view counts. I've always said there was interference, but this was off the charts. So it made me think perhaps he was intelligence connected. So I wouldn't have been on Brian's channel unless I had some respect for him. And I do think his heart is in the right place. But I'm going to call you out on the things that we fell out over, Brian. You said to me that you wouldn't forgive me for calling you a liar. Oh, God, another bloody wasp. This is like almost like a prop. Oh, right, I'll kill the wasp shortly. Sorry about this. Somebody even trolled me for cruelty to wasps. I can't love everybody and everything. I can't be all things to all men. I don't like wasps. I'm allergic to them, the stings. Right, so Brian, I'm going to call you out first. One lie. You gave me a phone number and said, this is my sister, and her daughter is in hospital having almost lost her leg in a deliberate hit and run. I phoned that phone number to get hold of you urgently, and the person I spoke to, believing to be your sister, turned out to be your mistress, Chantal. Chantal later contacted me and said, when you phoned thinking it was Brian's sister, it wasn't, it was me. So I know that to have been a lie. It may have been a lie of, I don't know, necessity, convenience. You were man enough to say that you'd had an affair and you'd actually been honey trapped, is what I think. You said you were anally raped, first of all, drugged, anally raped and filmed, probably for blackmail purposes and probably to shut you up. Those are your allegations, but they sounded quite plausible to me, and I think it took a lot of courage for you to go public with that. And I think if your wife forgave you for that affair, you better hold on to Blanca, because that's a pretty special woman. The other thing, and the more egregious lie, if you want to call it that, sorry to be indelicate, was you told me categorically, and I have it recorded. I don't record off my phone, but if I think a call is going to be important, I'll come down and record onto my computer. So I have quite a few phone calls recorded with you that I haven't released. But you told me categorically, and I shared it with my close associates, that you personally had possession of a DVD involving, and I'm going to say names on here, involving Ricky Dearman and the children, identifiable and with others in a ritual horrendous abuse video. You said it was so horrendous that you only watched about 30 seconds of it, long enough to screenshot the fact that the characters were identifiable, but then that your mother agreed to watch the whole thing and give her professional opinion as a former social worker, and whatever else, safeguarding person, psychology student, whatever. And you told me that she watched the whole thing and assured you that everything alleged against Ricky Dearman and the Hampstead cult was true, and it was even worse. You told me then you made 50 copies, you put them with solicitors, you put them with safe other people. You also told me you were going to mail me a copy, mail Andy Devine a copy, deliver a copy to my assistant, who drove to Romford to meet you. The weekend he was moving, he took time out to drive across London to Romford to a secret location to take ownership or take possession of this evidence. I also informed the Chief of Police in Ireland that very sensitive evidence, when you said, you know, it was beyond your control why you couldn't mail them, you said you posted them, they must have got intercepted, they never arrived, and Andy's never arrived, and whoever else you posted one to never arrived, and you couldn't meet my assistant with a copy. You then said you would fly over or drive over, and you set the date. I got the guest room ready, I turned away family visitors, and you didn't come. I not only did that, I alerted the Chief of Police that somebody was traveling with highly sensitive evidence regarding Ricky Dearman, and please to advise me to whom to pass it on. I was not going to view it myself. And I was advised what to do with that. So none of that materialized. So you now saying that you made a mistake last year, and now you completely retract, and you find the father completely innocent, and you are absolutely buying the narrative that the mother and boyfriend coached and implanted all the hours and hours and hours of disclosures by the children, and the medical evidence backing it up, and the forensic evidence gathered in the following years. You've gone back on that. So it makes me very concerned, and that I think your heart's in the right place. I think you've got some work to do with regard to being adopted, with regard to, you know, what's gone on in your childhood, with regard to what's caused your mental health issues. But I still think you're a force to be reckoned with. And the other thing I had to call you out on, and you might hate me for this forever, but you told me that Ian Puddick paid you £1,000 to go after 4 people online that were giving him hassle, including Brian Harvey. And you said you have the bank receipt. You know, your bank statement shows that transfer of £1,000 from Ian Puddick. So my sense is that, yes, Ian Puddick contracted you to do some heavy work, and somewhere along the line you stumbled on the truth and you turned to the good side, to such detriment that Ian Puddick has tried to take you to court and had your computer seized and tried to prosecute you for harassment, even though he originally hired you for enforcement, shall we call it. Right, so I hope you will continue to follow the good path, but I do, as I say, I have a little bit of doubt, A, because you did lie to me about your sister's phone number and about arriving imminently with evidence. And you carried that on for 3 months, and it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. Those of us that campaigned for the truth to be exposed fully of the Hampstead case since 2015, you dangled a carrot for 3 months and then didn't follow through, and now you're retracting a year later. Devastating. Devastating. That's that. Tom Cahill. I should play, if I could be asked, the outburst from you on Dream Team's live stream last night, starting off when Brian and Esau had hopped off the stream. You get braver when they're gone. And you were outrageous. You were outrageous. And the twisted truths that you divulged were shocking and straight out of Hoaxdead research. You said terrible, terrible things and dangerously, factually wrong. So before I defend the truth again, let me just say, I've seen some dark sides to you, Tom. I've watched you on and off since 2014, possibly a bit earlier. I have never taken against you, but Jess contacted me, this middle-aged Canadian, little bit unstable lady that you met in Thailand. She contacted me in comments last year when I reached out to you or mentioned you in a video, and she sent me all the video evidence. And I think somewhere along the line, I saw Lee Ravenscroft's evidence too. And although I think they both have agendas or issues, it was not a pretty picture. I saw videos and photographs of you passed out on benches, having urinated yourself, unconscious, drunk, in various disarray. Jess said you broke your teeth falling down drunk, which you regularly did in Thailand, and that you were broke and relied on your parents sending you pocket money once a month, and she paid $300 or something, or 300 something or other to get you dentures, and then you fell again drunk and broke those too. Now, it does seem like this was a middle-aged lady that had a crush on you, but it also seems that you had a part to play in, you know, if you're not interested, you don't let a middle-aged lady pay for you to get a new set of dentures. She says she got you into the hostel where you were actually not welcome because of your drink problem, and that she stuck her neck out to get you to be allowed to stay there. And unrequited love, you know, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. But you need to own that you had, possibly still have, but it doesn't seem so rampant now, but that you had an alcohol issue that was out of control. I also found it curious that not long after Ian Puddick visited your parents' home in an attempt to silence you for your very powerful work, but it was maybe a year, how much longer after that did you miraculously receive a one-way ticket to Thailand? And the question always has to be asked, Thailand, Malaysia, Bangkok, Cambodia, sometimes, you know, the Philippines, Vietnam. Sex tourism is a huge thing in those countries, particularly with children. So I don't think you're a nonce, but there always has to be questions asked about those kind of destinations. But if it was just a case that you were bullied off the internet and given a one-way ticket to fuck off, and you hit the bottle big time and took advantage of a middle-aged, unstable lady, then own it and don't say they've got nothing on me and they're all crazy, because you did have a huge alcohol problem. The second thing I wanted to say, Brian, is Tom Carr's got a lot in common with you, in as much as, just as you said, Ian Puddick paid you £1,000 to go after 4 people that he believed to be trolling him or exposing him. Lee Ravenscroft, according to my research, offered to put Tom Cahill up if Tom would go after 4 people online that he wanted going after, including me. And I believe the person that made that request to Lee Ravenscroft was Tracy Morris. I'd done a big expose on her, 2 or 3 videos exposing her. And she was the champion of Lee Ravenscroft, that his daughter had been kidnapped by paedophiles. And then his daughter did a video and said, I watched my dad beat the crap out of my mum all through my childhood. And he tried to murder my husband, now husband, that I'm married to with 2 children and happy with. So back off, Tracy Morris, and stop it. And back off, Dad, you know what you've done. Now, if it's true that Lee Ravenscroft spent a year in jail for battering his wife, and then when he got out, she accidentally had a flying bottle almost sever her jugular, it's not the kind of person I'd like to give credence to, even though the family into which his daughter ran away are colourful, to say the least. And there may well be some domestic violence going on there, but you can only help somebody that wants to be helped. And sadly, if his daughter considers being married with 2 children in a family that don't go to jail for trying to murder their wives or try to murder their husbands, sadly, that's her choice. So Tracy Morris, Tom's got a lot of useful insights, but you need to own up to your own shit, Tom. And I'll quote Sharon Gale, you need to be very careful with your words, because the description you gave of myself, and particularly my involvement with Tracy Morris and the young couple that she delivered to my home, married couple, was so factually inaccurate. If I was into legal proceedings, it would merit that, but so would Hoaxted, because most of it came from them. I'll try, and I had more things to discuss, but I'm just going to try and close this on Tracy Morris, and I'll go on to the other things. Yeah, I'll do a separate video. Bleeding Heart and I have a lot to talk about, especially with regard to Catholic rehabs. Ben Fellows is a classic example of a trafficked street urchin, adopted from, I think, the streets of Brazil at 6 as a street urchin, with an original name of Pablo. And everything else makes sense when you get to the bottom of that. The artwork, it's not satanic. I've said that several times on Hoaxted, but I'll just finish up on the truth about Tracy Morris. And last night I was raging and furious, as I was a week ago, but I try not to broadcast in anger, although today I tell you my anger's up. But I'm trying to channel it into getting the truth out for you know, how many attempts have I made to get the truth out? I've had my channel taken down with 500 videos. I'm careful with my new, you know, my backup channel. I'm going to BitChute, you know, I'm trying to get the truth out, but there's none so blind as those that will not see. You were brutal, Tom Cahill, brutal, as well as outrageously inaccurate. So I'll tell you the good things about Tracy Morris. I jumped into the Hampstead case very naive, not really aware of COINTELPRO or PSYOPs or anything like that. I just listened to 34 videos of the Hampstead children disclosing and then allegedly retracting with Steve Martin. And as a survivor and somebody that's worked with wounded children and survivors for decades, I sensed a huge amount of truth. I've never said 100% truth, but I would estimate about 80% truth came out of those children's mouths. But here's what got me hooked into Tracy Morris. I jumped in, and then the Hampstead groups on Facebook, and Belinda McKenzie, Sabine McNeil, and you know, different people, Nilu Berry, and then belatedly Tracy Morris turned up, and I'm naive. I take everybody at face value until they prove me wrong. But you can count on me when they do prove me wrong, I will say so. But in the good news, when the multiple times that Sabine McNeill was arrested, one of the times where she was arrested, I think it was at the Royal Courts of Justice or something like that, on live stream, and arrested for allegedly releasing the children's videos online. Tracy Morris was in touch with somebody in Wales who had proof that the videos had been released online way earlier than Sabine released them in February 2015. This person in Wales had found them on the dark web and had released them, but they didn't go viral at that time. He'd released, I think, 2 or 3 of them. He also found evidence that they'd been released in Russia. Remember, Ella's Russian. So the evidence he found was that Ella or somebody had released them in Russia. The videos were made August 2014. By, I think, November, they'd been released in Russia. And in December, I think it was, released on the dark web, neither of which went viral. They only went viral when Sabine, inadvertently or otherwise, copied in the Needle blog, whatever it was called, in February 2015, when she'd actually sent them to Theresa May to say, please listen to these children, something's got to be done. And Tracy Morris got Sabine released from prison by going to the police station with that evidence from the Welsh guy, showing that they had been on the dark web months before Sabine had released them. Now, so then that was one good check mark in her favour. Another very convincing story Tracy Morris told me, and I do believe there's mixtures of truth and lies with her, was that when she was living near Birmingham, she had to see it. She was a single parent, I think, on the run from Ireland. She was always like upsetting either the loyalists or the Republicans or both. She was on the run from Ireland and then living in Birmingham with her children, and for some reason had to see a solicitor. And this solicitor said, oh, my wife and I run a charity out in our spare time. We take vulnerable children away for weekends or on holidays because, you know, many of them are from single parent families and can't afford a holiday. And Tracy had red flags about it. I think she let her children go once or twice, because this is the mixture of truth and lies. But she says she uncovered a paedophile ring connected to this solicitor and involving Greville Janner, Lord Greville Janner, and Sir Jimmy Savile. She says that she then talked to local other single parents with vulnerable children who had believed this solicitor's charity, and they all had similar stories of the children coming back traumatized and abused. She says she reported that, and it took a couple of years, and she was then by then back in Belfast and was flown over as the chief witness because she'd gathered evidence. She's good at some of the stuff she does. Flown back to Birmingham or wherever it was as the chief witness in this case. She also says that when she arrived, they told her there's a danger to your life. You can't testify in the court. We're going to do a video link for you from the basement. So they hustled her down to the basement, set up a video link, allegedly, and allowed her to give her full testimony, and then said to her, thank you very much, wonderful job, we've got him nailed, off you go. And she went back to Belfast. She says it took 2 years for her to discover that the trial was told that the chief witness was a no-show and the trial collapsed. She said she didn't find that out for 2 years. So to my naive, trusting ears, I thought this is some campaigner, this is some brave lady. I invited her to Lanzarote. I paid for a ticket, and we flew I brought her out to my apartment in Lanzarote for a week. And then she went home and I stayed there, living there. And then I was home on a trip from Lanzarote in Ireland. I've got a home in Meath. And she then decided I was one of her safe houses. She had this grandiose plan to set up a network of child trafficking warriors, you know, anti-child trafficking warriors, and set up safe houses and, you know, overcome corruption and all the rest of it. And she had this millionaire that was going to fund it, who was actually a homeless man she'd taken in, who did indeed have a win of 8 million, maybe 15 years earlier on the lotto. And he managed to convince her that he still had 6 million left and he would fund her grandiose plans to be this international campaigner. And she contacted me and said, I've got this married couple, the wife's due to give birth, we need to get them out of the country, they're going to take the baby at the hospital. And literally put me on the spot with a phone call and said, they just need to stay overnight at yours, and then can you get them to the ferry? I've got a safe house for them in France. So I said, okay. She turned up with this couple, and the wife was already 2 centimeters dilated. She tried to encourage me to get her on the boat. Even if she gave birth on the boat, at least she'd be safe. I couldn't do that. She tried to send to me what she called a qualified midwife for a home birth in my house. And this turned out not to be a midwife at all, just somebody else who had a home birth herself safely. I tried to arrange a midwife to come to the home, but in the end, for safety's sake and listening to the distraught couple, I got them to the local hospital where they gave birth safely. When Tracy dropped the couple to my house, she had the husband sign over the logbook of his car. The arrangement was they would get to France and she would send them the money. She'd sell their car for them and send them the money for it. France never materialized. The funding for the safe house in France never materialized because the homeless man was just a big fantasy. The couple gave birth safely, and then they got, the wife was foolish enough to ring her mum in Belfast, who worked at the Parliament. Can't remember the name they call it, begins with S, but anyway, was a civil servant, quite senior civil servant. And understandably, the wife wanted to phone her mum and say, I've had the baby, it's a little boy, he's this way, I'm safe, he's safe. I then thought, right, so because the wife rang her mother, and the mother then told the social worker who bullied her, the social worker bullied her into disclosing. The police in Belfast listed the mother as missing and in danger from her husband. And then I tried to reassure people she's not in danger, she's given birth, she's safe. So then I tried to help from here. One of the things that happened was in the north, in a very corrupt social services and family court system, the mother had been given all ridiculous mental health diagnoses to justify taking her baby from her, including borderline personality disorder, cluster A, cluster B, blah, blah, da, da. So one of the things I did while she was here, and I never charged her a penny, I fundraised, some people sent money to help just for the bare logistics, but I got her a full evaluation at Meath Mental Health Services, psychiatric services. They gave her such a glowing report. They said she not only was she mentally well and stable, but that she showed immense fortitude and courage, and they gave her a clean bill of health. I got her a legal team, my daughter and I did. I was a Mackenzie friend for her in the court. I got her very favourable terms, you know, 3 visits a day for breastfeeding and 7 days a week and so on and so forth. And then we were looking very hopeful that there would be no forced adoption and that she would be reunited with the child within a matter of months. Sadly, the social services from the north kept getting involved, coming to the court cases and trying to influence the social services down here, who were behaving quite well with the couple. They had originally said they were taking the child because her husband was a danger. He was an ex-paramilitary. He was quite a bit older than her, but they were totally in love and very devoted to each other. So that was their grounds. They were going to remove the baby because allegedly an ex of his had said he forced sex on her when she was with him. I saw evidence that she then texted her husband and said, I didn't mean it. They made me say it. They bullied me. They took me in. They threatened me. You know, they tricked me. They did sneaky questioning of, you know, did your husband ever, or do your boyfriend, I don't know, his husband or boyfriend at that time, you know, did he ever go ahead with having sex when you didn't feel like it, so on and so forth. So they tried to fit him up with a rape charge. It never stuck. There were no charges. But this was what they were convincing the wife of. You know, your husband's, he's an ex-paramilitary and there's a rape allegation against him. You know, we can't leave the baby with you. When they came south and things were going well, this is the thing about displacing people. Tracy Morris got annoyed because we were live streaming daily. We were getting fantastic court results. We were getting fantastic results with social services. And it didn't fit with her being the superstar of this imaginary network she was going to set up to be the biggest campaigner in Europe, the Bill Maloney, as John Wedger called her, the Bill Maloney of Ireland. So she then contacted the couple and said, oh, I made a mistake sending you to Angie. She's only in it for the fame and money. Come back north, I've sorted everything for you. It's all done, all sorted. Got your lovely solicitor, Joe something or other. And, you know, it's all in the bag. You've got nothing to worry about. Just come north and I'll take over again. The homesickness of having been displaced and having a new baby and having had a difficult birth. If I hadn't gotten to a hospital, the mother could have died. She was hospitalized in the court, I think the day after the birth. She was rushed off in an ambulance, hemorrhaging. Horrendous, horrendous, irresponsible to deliver a couple and say, give them a home birth. I'm all for home births if it's safe and you've never had a complication and you've got a standby option. But even to say, get her on a boat, even if she gives birth on the boat, and then to say there's a safe house in France, except for, oh, I promised them a few thousand for all the people I've sent to her, but, you know, my millionaire backer hasn't come through. It was a complete chaotic mess, and I tried to normalize and formalize and rescue as much of it as I could. So between the father feeling that if he was out of the picture, maybe his wife could keep the baby, and the mother feeling postnatal and wanting to believe she could go back to her native city and trust Tracy Morris that everything would work out, they went back, and it flipped from being a reunite plan with a clean bill of mental health in the south and huge public support. It flipped back to the Tracy Morris scenario. They got another psychiatrist to look at the mother and said, oh no, you definitely have all these diagnoses and probably some more. You're not even fit to have a pet, let alone a baby. The father, in despair, I think that it sounds crazy, but I think the thing that flipped him over the edge was Tracy wouldn't give the car back. You know, having aborted the plan to get to France and her to sell the car and send him the money, he made a very simple request. I need my car back. My wife's traveling to Cavan every day to see the baby. And we're still carrying on proceedings down south. And I need to get around. I need my car back. She wouldn't give it back. It took ages to get the car back. And the stress of the whole thing and feeling unworthy and having whatever wounds from his past, he went to the doctors and said, I'm feeling suicidal. This is in the north, nothing to do. It was out of my hands. Tracy Morris had taken the whole thing back. But I'm still in touch with his wife, and she's very well settled, no longer resident in the north, and hugely, she'll never recover from what happened, but hugely recovering, I'll put it that way. But she got her husband to go. They'd gone back north. He had a home there. They eventually got the car back off Tracy, but it had been horrendous. And she saw that her husband's mental health was in a mess. He went to the doctors and he said, I'm suicidal. And the doctors turned him away, I think, with a prescription. The next morning, he got up before she was awake, she'd spent most of the night awake with him, trying to comfort him. He was hugely frustrated that the doctor hadn't helped. She finally fell asleep about 6 in the morning. She woke up about 8:30 to see he was missing. And what he had done had been, he'd gone to the local park, made a very elaborate hanging rope on a tree and hung himself. She contacted me. I was the first person she phoned. And she told me I was back in Lanzarote, but I flew home for the funeral. And she still kept fighting for 2 years to keep the baby. But because she had been entrapped back into the system from which she had fled, Lisbon Social Services in Belfast, and because they dismissed her clear and clean psychiatric record in the south, they'd shifted the court case back to the north because she had gone back home. And despite her incredible attempts to survive the suicide of her beloved husband and keep fighting for her beloved son, just after he was 2, he was force adopted. The only good news out of that is that the little boy is allowed to see his siblings. The lady has two older children. He's allowed access. They're allowed to see each other once or twice a year, and she gets regular updates, but it was still a disastrous outcome. So there are some good and brave things that Tracy Morris has done, but there are some absolutely scandalous, reckless, sinister things that she's done, much like, I have to say, Bill Maloney, John Wedger, and others, Jeanette Archer, in my opinion. Possibly connected to the fact that she had a cocaine habit and a prescription medication habit, and a habit of taking people's cars and driving them illegally and emptying people, not emptying, but withdrawing from people's bank accounts. So I exposed her, and I had spent, before all this, I had spent 2 or 3 days at her home. If I'm going to work with somebody, I'd try and meet them face to face. And a red flag I should have paid more attention to at the time. Maybe it was only 2 days I spent at Tracy's home before all this, before she delivered me these married couple on the run. And I noticed that she drove very erratically. I didn't realize she had a cocaine habit, I'm naive. I didn't realise she had a prescription med habit, but I did notice her driving. To me, I would consider it dangerous driving. And one of the things she told me while I was there was that she had hit a little boy outside the school and he'd broken both his legs. And she had successfully defended that it was nothing to do with her and he'd just run out in front of her. But coming back home and thinking about it, I just joined some dots rightly or wrongly, thinking, and then I'd found out about the cocaine and tablet addiction. I just thought, she is a dangerous driver, and a little boy's legs got broken outside of school, and everybody got convinced it was the little boy's fault. So that's the sad truth. And then coming back to Tom Cahill, and I'll try and capture the nasty things he said that were untrue. He said things like, I'd said I'd been abducted by aliens. Never, never. Miles Johnston said in a description of one of the interviews of me, oh, she was human hunted by aliens. That's why I exposed Miles Johnston, because his job was to discredit MK Ultra or military paedophile ring disclosures. And so that's one of the ways he did it, by introducing crazy shit. I've talked about that a lot. What was the other thing Tom said? Oh yeah, I was adding things to my story all the time. First of all, I was a child abuse victim, then I was MK Ultra, now I'm SRA. I've never said I'm an SRA survivor. I did talk about human hunting. I did talk about severe drugging and DID, which is on my medical notes. I did talk about, you know, when you, memory gaps, where if you've been drugged for abuse or experiments, there's gaps. You have fractured memories. You might remember the beginning of an incident, the middle of the end. You don't know how you got there. You don't know how you got back. That's the point of these date rape drugs, or LSD or scopolamine or whatever different drugs were used and refined and experimented on and researched, at least since World War II, supposedly to beat the Russians in the race for mind control, or supposedly after the Korean War to find out why the soldiers came back saying that the Koreans were wonderful and the Americans were terrible. But any good plan or good idea attracts evil people as well. And pedophiles revel in finding drugs that will make children not remember they've been raped, or even adults. Everybody's familiar with Rohypnol. So I have never said, I will never say a memory I don't have. And I've never gone for hypnosis or memory regression. And I've stayed away from a lot of other people's disclosures. I distanced myself from Miles Johnston and the whole Basis circle because I didn't want to contaminate my own healing journey by hearing other people's disclosures. I've been validated by one very highly respected SRA therapist in America, and also by Kevin Shipp. I've had people say my story hasn't changed for more than a decade of disclosures. I've got a DVD on Vimeo called Chasing Rainbows, where I refer to the early childhood stuff. I just don't blab it out all over the place because it's so triggering and so damaging when people like Tom Cahill and Karen Irving and Hoaxted Research and Danny Jones and other people say, oh, she's a liar, she makes shit up. And when I see other people, fakes, there are fakes out there making SRA disclosures, when I see them using my disclosures, which I've quietly made in a private group I've had on Facebook for 8 or 9 years, or on Vimeo, or on my YouTube channel that got taken down but is getting re-uploaded, I've quietly disclosed for years. So for people like Tom Cahill, who just hasn't done his due diligence, to turn around and say I'm a liar, that kind of ignorance, I hope it's just ignorance with him and not malice. With hoaxed research, it's malice. It's paid, in my opinion, orchestrated malice to discredit survivors. But with people that just believe it ignorantly, without the courtesy of asking me, what's the truth of this? You're the reason why a lot of people don't come forward. I look forward to talking to Luke, and yeah, definitely to hearing more, because Fiona Barnett's somebody I've backed for years, and he has cast some evidence-based doubt on some of the strands of her disclosures. So I will go where the truth takes me. I don't belong to any cult. And if I find a Christian lying or deceiving or worse, I'll shout it from the rooftops. That'll do for now. Please pray, and God bless.